So today we are going to talk about the self-verifiable nature of mental suffering. So when you say suffering, it can be suffering, sorrow, or even something small like a hesitation, an agitation, right? Something that puts you in a bad mood. Basically, anything that creates this bitter feeling inside of you, right? It can be a family member, it can be a colleague, it can be a countryman, it can be an object, not being able to have an object like buy a car or a house, or it can be a conceptual thing, right? Why can't all people be kind to animals? So if you were to solve these things one by one, right? You solving them one by one, you will run out of life before you solve the entire list, right? You need to solve the entire list to be at mental peace also. Right? So we need to find if there's a way, like a blueprint to mental suffering, that we can figure out that is the root for all of this suffering, right? So you can think of it like there's a house with many faulty switches, right? Rather than going and turning them off one by one, if you can just turn off the main switch, right, and mitigate that risk. So like that, we want to see if there's a common theory for this, right, for mental suffering. Right? And we should not simply accept it because it's being said, or there are some good arguments to support that. What you need to do is you need to compare this. As you're listening to this, you need to compare with all the negative experiences that you can remember in your life. Compare it with this and see, does this theory fit yeah, that those times that caused you suffering. And make sure that there are no gaps, right? When there are no gaps and it fits all of your experiences, that's when you have a self-verifiable nature, a self-verifiable theory of mental suffering, right? So let's go into an example, right? So usually we expect the external world uh, to change to have mental peace, right? So let's say we have an office and there's like the person that's it's a gossip, right? They spread bad rumors about you, and just seeing them, right, it causes you that bitter feeling inside, right? Just seeing them. So usually the way we react to it is we want the external world to change, right? So that we don't have that bitter feeling inside of us. So usually what that is like, what that is like, it's like a dog, right? It's like a dog biting on a bone which has no flesh. It's just biting on this bone, hoping that it will full its stomach, right? It will never happen. It's like you squeezing a granite stone, hoping to find water. You won't find water. It's like those deers running behind mirages, thinking there's water. They'll never find water, right? So it's something that will never happen, right? So what you need to do is, when that happens, you need to look at, okay, why? You just saw that person, right? You just saw that person, right? And you're in a neutral state, you identified that person, but then what does your mind do, right? Your mind compares against the list that it has, right? That you're attached to, right? That list of things that are good, valuable, and substantial, right? It compares with this list, and let's say it's your best friend, right? Or they conform to your list. So then what happens? There's happiness in your mind, right? But now when you saw them, now it's at Osif, the office gossip, right? They don't conform to this list, right? Then what happens? You're annoyed, right? You have this suffering within you. So with this example, you can see that this entire piece, the emotions that you added onto it, was entirely mentally fabricated, right? It happened internally in your mind, right? To explain this further, let's take an example, right? Let's say you go to office, right? When you go to office, there's a cake, right? People blindfold you and they feed you this piece of cake, right? So when you have that taste, there's a signal that goes, and you can give it a value, right? This it tastes like this, like you can say taste 10, right? It has a taste of 10. You just give it a value. Now they so you're in a neutral state, right? But now they remove this blindfold, and you compare with this list. Who was feeding you this piece of cake? It's your best friend, right? And your best friend has maybe worked with your kid, maybe, right, to bake you this cake at home, right? Now what happens? Now it tastes like 50, right? You're eating with this happiness, and now it tastes much better, right? Because it's the people you care about that has done this for you. They have done this specifically for you, right? uh, the other scenario, right? You're in office, they're blindfolded you, they feed you this piece of cake, right? Yeah, it's taste of 10, neutral. They remove the blindfold. It's this office gossip, right? The office gossip has is feeding you this. You check with this list, and now what happens? It's a taste of -20, right? It can be it has gone minus also, right? And then you might even spit out that cake and see, how dare you feed me this cake, right? So again, you can see that this entire piece is a mental fabrication, right? It happens internally within you, right? So what you're talking about is how do we get rid of this the mental suffering piece of it, right? So we'll focus on that, right? So it can be a person, it can be an object, not being able to buy a car or a house. It can be a conceptual thing. I wish everybody was kind to animals, right? So all these things, how do you perceive the world? Right? You can only perceive it through sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, or thought, right? So from these things, what doesn't fall into mental suffering is the touch piece. If somebody hits you, then you feel physical pain, but all the rest of it, it's just signals that you feel, and uh, there's no mental suffering to begin with, right? You're in a neutral state when you observe these things. But then what do you do? You have this list of things that you're attached to. So attachment, now you can understand that attachment is internal, right? It's not necessarily that you're attached to the car. You're attached to the idea of this car. That you're attached to this list saying the car is good. It's good. It's valuable. It's substantial, right? So you have a list of things. The moment these signals don't conform to that list, that's when suffering arises, right? So you can think of this, right? Let's take a few more scenarios, right? It can be let's say you're somebody who goes to work and you come home and you have an elderly parent at home, right? Maybe they need some attention, right? And maybe they're faking an illness, right? I'm telling you this, I heard this story a few times recently. So what you feel is that person faking that illness is what's causing you suffering. Now think again, right? Is it that person, or is it that you do have a list of things in your mind that saying people should not do things like this, people should not bother me, right? Things like that. So it's that not happening that's causing you suffering, right? Anything, right? It can be something small, even like maybe a sports team losing. You think the sports team losing caused you pain, or you had this list of things saying they should win, right? If it rains, I think the rain caused you pain. Let's say you had an idea of saying, I want to sun dry my clothes today. Took that as valuable and you attached to that. That's when suffering happens, right? If you didn't have that, maybe you're sleeping and it's raining. You say, it's good weather to sleep, and it won't cause you that pain, right? So the moment we blame the external world to it, right? External world, and we try to change that, right? That's like, you remember the three examples. It's like a dog biting on a bone that doesn't have any flesh, hoping it will fulfill its stomach. It's like trying to get water from a granite stone. It's like running behind those deers running behind the mirage expecting water, right? That is not where the problem is, right? For you to have mental peace, the sports team does not need to win. Your elderly parent does not need to behave the way you want, right? What you need to understand is the issue is with the list. You have created a list in your mind. You're attached to that list internally, and you're comparing it always. You're checking with that. If it does not conform to it, that's when suffering arises. Right? So now compare with all the sufferings that you can remember since you were small, right? All the past sufferings, all the present sufferings. There's no suffering that's stemmed without the external world not conforming to this list. Always it's because the external world did not conform to this list. But as you compare, you'll see, okay, this is the concept I was attached to. This is what I did not get from the world. This is not what I did not get out from the world. And you will see that there are no gaps in this theory, right? And if all the past sufferings and the present sufferings are due to this, then all the future sufferings that you will have is also because of due to this, right? This attachment you have to this list of things that your mind always compares against, right? So now you don't need to be specially told, right? So what you need to do is you need to reduce the attachment that you have to this list. So it's an internal thing that you have to do. Yeah. So you might say, does that, so even death, is it like this? Like, yes, even death, right? So let's say there's a middle-aged member in your family, right? They die. Let's say 50, 60 years of age, they die. And you have this list of things in your mind saying, I wish I could speak to them one more time. I wish we could go to these places. I wish we could do this. I wish I could buy them things, right? You have a long list and you're very attached to that list, right? That's what's causing you suffering. So we'll just give it a value, right? We'll say it causes you 150 suffering. Yeah. So think of that same person if they were bedridden for 10 years, let's say, right? And you can see their body changing. If they die, what happens? Now you say, because they're suffering also, right? You might say, oh, I wish they didn't suffer, right? So now that list of things that you expected from them, right, it's no more, right? It's a smaller list compared to, and your list attached to that list, right? And that suffering is now comparatively less, right? But if death itself caused you suffering, then regardless of whether they were bedridden or not, it should cause you the same suffering, right? So now you can see that this is actually the intensity of that suffering is the intensity of that attachment that you had to this list. The moment you have this list, suffering is encapsulated with this, right? It's part of it, right? Because you're trying to force the external world not to be like that. If you see in the case of that annoying person, right? You need to put effort. You need to suffer to make that external world conform to what you want, right? Let's say that person who was annoying to you, right? Who annoys you, that gossip. They used to be your friend, right? That friend who conformed to this list, not conforming to this list, that change is causing you suffering, right? And you think to yourself, oh, I wish I did not trust them. I wish I did this differently. You're suffering on top of your suffering, right? And even if it confirms, right, you run out of life at one point, right? So either way, suffering is encapsulated the moment you're attached to a list like this that your mind always compares against. So if you have 1,000 items, if you're attached to 1,000 items, the mind values, right, takes as good, valuable, and substantial. There are 1,000 things in this world that can cause you suffering. There are 100 things. There are 100 things that can cause you suffering. If you're attached to one item, right, one item that you take as good value, there's only one thing in the world that can cause you suffering. And if you have no attachment to such list, and there are 0 items on that list, no attachment, then there's nothing in this world that can cause you suffering. So think of it, compare it with your experiences, and figure out, right? There are no gaps in this. This is always the case. And now you can be, you can have better mental peace and the resulting relaxation of the body than you had yesterday. Because earlier you thought if the external world did behave like this, that's when you will have mental peace and the relaxation of the body based on that. But now you know, if you reduce that attachment on your mind side to this list, that's when you will have mental peace and the resulting relaxation of the body based on that. So may this help you to reduce mental suffering and be on the journey to reduce mental suffering further. Namo Buddhaya.